8. Jennifer Elizabeth Marie Broxson. A young woman named Allison Marie Dejeunesse was shot dead by a vehicle owner in October 2020 during a carjacking gone wrong in Pace, Florida. Her alleged accomplice, 18-year-old Jennifer Broxson, was injured by the gunfire but survived. According to authorities, Broxson and the carjacking victim began chatting on Snapchat before the crime. An arrest report states that Broxson alluded to meeting up for intimacy and asked if she could bring Dejeunesse along. The man agreed, but he became uncomfortable after picking the women up because they kept commenting on how nice his car was and asking him questions about it. He was planning to get out of the situation and leave when Broxson allegedly told him that Dejeunesse had a gun and instructed him to step away from the vehicle. He initially complied, but got into a physical struggle with the suspects when they demanded his cell phone. The victim said that he strangled Dejeunesse in an effort to render her unconscious when she prevented him from getting into his car. At the same time, Broxson tased him with a stun gun and struck him in the head with a hammer. After failing to fight the women off with a baton he kept in his car, the man went for his gun and fired at his attackers. At the time, he believed Broxson and Dejeunesse were trying to get their own gun out of his back seat, although, as it turned out, they were only pretending to be armed. After opening fire on the suspects, he dialed 911 and waited for emergency responders to arrive. Because Broxson was present during the commission of the crime, she was charged with second-degree murder for Dejeunesse's death. According to prison records, she's serving a 20-year sentence for murder and carjacking and will be released in 2040 at the age of 38. 7. Nico Brown. The futures of 4 young Florida men are hanging in the balance over allegations that they killed 2 innocent strangers during a drive-by shooting in Orlando. According to police, the incident in question happened on a Tuesday evening in September 2023. One of the victims, 19-year-old Isaiah Wright, was pronounced dead after being dropped off at an emergency room with gunshot wounds. Wright's mother told local station WESH that she didn't know if her son was a target in the shooting or if he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The mother of another victim said that she and her daughter were watching TV in their living room when bullets came flying into their living room, injuring the woman and killing her daughter. Investigators do not believe that the 2 were the intended targets of the gunfire. 4 teenage men have been charged with murder in connection with the shooting, including Ricky Bowery Jr. and Nico Brown. All 4 suspects reportedly have criminal histories despite their young ages. The public got a disturbing glimpse of Brown's attitude when he flashed a huge, sarcastic grin as he was let out of the police station. He probably won't be smiling as the case proceeds in court, and he realizes that he could end up spending the majority of his adulthood behind bars. 6. Heavenly Aroyo. In a horrifying act of violence that occurred in October 2019, a young woman named Heavenly Aroyo mercilessly stabbed a bedridden elderly woman to death in Fall River, Massachusetts. The victim, identified as the mother of Aroyo's great-uncle's girlfriend, 68-year-old Ana Vasquez Rodriguez, was stabbed over 70 times with a pair of scissors. Having suffered from a stroke at an earlier point in time, she was incapable of defending herself. Aroyo's great-uncle had taken the teen into his home a few weeks earlier at her mother's request. On the day of the murder, he and his girlfriend had planned to take Aroyo to New York State to obtain some paperwork they needed in order to try taking formal custody of her in court. The family ran into car troubles before they could leave, and Aroyo grew increasingly impatient. After killing the victim, the teen showered and threw her clothes in a dumpster. She then told a household member that Vasquez Rodriguez wasn't feeling well. The family member went to check on the senior citizen and dialed 911 as soon as they discovered her body. Aroyo reportedly told police that she saw a masked man running from the house while she was outside with the family dog. But she admitted to bits and pieces of the truth during questioning and eventually made a full confession to the gruesome crime. During her first court appearance, Aroyo smiled repeatedly and did not appear to take the situation seriously. According to a police report, she had walked around the interrogation room talking to herself and was heard saying, "I killed the old lady, I'm sorry." Bristol County District Attorney Thomas Quinn II acknowledged that Aroyo was suffering from mental health issues at the time of the murder, but argued that she was a danger to society who needed to be locked up for the sake of public safety. The teen pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 19 years. 5. Mason Cisk. An entire community was shaken to its core in 2019 when a family of 5 was found murdered inside their Elkmont, Alabama home. They had all been shot in their sleep. One household member, a young man named Mason Cisk, somehow escaped the carnage despite the death of his parents, 38-year-old John Cisk and 35-year-old Mary Cisk, as well as his siblings. At first glance, he may have seemed lucky, but it was no coincidence that he survived and everyone else didn't. Mason told police that he was playing video games in his basement when he heard multiple gunshots. According to his original version of events, he rushed outside and saw a vehicle pulling away. Quite frankly, Mason's story didn't add up to investigators, who also found it suspicious that he called his girlfriend before dialing 911. He eventually admitted to the murders, telling law enforcement that he became fed up with his family's constant fighting. In text messages to his girlfriend, Lola Holiday, Cisk bragged about being good with a gun and killing his entire family in less than 4 seconds. Mason's first trial ended in a mistrial. During the second trial, the teen was convicted of 4 counts of capital murder and sentenced to life without parole, meaning he'll spend every single day of his adult existence behind bars. He showed no emotion and chose not to speak at the hearing. In a statement he delivered during Mason's sentencing, Limestone County District Attorney Brian C.T. Jones described Cisk as one of the 4 or 5 people out of the many he's prosecuted who scare the hell out of him. 4. Alexander Pring Wilson. While walking home after a night of clubbing in Cambridge, Massachusetts in April 2003, 25-year-old Harvard graduate student Alexander Pring Wilson got into an altercation with 2 young men outside a pizza shop. Pring Wilson had been drinking, and so had 18-year-old Michael Colano and Samuel Rodriguez, who were sitting in their car while waiting for their order at the restaurant. What happened next is disputed. According to prosecutors, Colano made a snarky comment at Pring Wilson about how drunk he was. Pring Wilson allegedly opened the car door and fatally attacked Colano with a knife. The defense, on the other hand, argued that Colano and Rodriguez charged at Pring Wilson and took him to the ground, giving him no choice but to defend himself with the knife he was carrying. Police arrested Pring Wilson on suspicion of murder. He was initially denied bail because his knowledge of 5 languages caused the judge to fear he was a flight risk. Pring Wilson maintained his innocence throughout the court proceedings. He was convicted of voluntary manslaughter in 2004. But he appealed his case, and the conviction was overturned the following year. A second trial ended in a mistrial when the jury found themselves hopelessly deadlocked. As a third trial rolled around in 2008, 5 years after Colano's death, Pring Wilson pleaded guilty to a reduced involuntary manslaughter charge. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, and while it may not have cost the young man his future, his plans to become a lawyer or do anything else that felons aren't allowed to do came to an end, forcing him to find another path. 3. Colleen Larson. 32-year-old forensic scientist Nicole "Nikki" Lenway was on her way to pick her son up from a visit with his father in 2022 when a masked assailant rushed up to her from behind and shot her in broad daylight. The suspect sped off in a Dodge Ram pickup truck, leaving Nikki on the sidewalk with gunshot wounds to her neck and arm. Good Samaritans rushed over and did their best to stem the bleeding while waiting for an ambulance to arrive. Nikki was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, but miraculously survived her injuries. At first, investigators wondered if Nikki's job for the Minneapolis Police Department made her a target. But their suspicions quickly focused on the father of her child, Tim Amaker, who denied any involvement in the attempted murder of his ex-girlfriend, and they didn't have to look hard for a motive. For years, Tim had falsely accused Nikki and her new partner of horrific crimes in family court, and she had even gone to trial after being accused of running Tim's foot over with her car. But Nikki had been cleared of any wrongdoing and granted full custody of their child, while Tim was only allowed one weekly supervised visit. Tim owned a Dodge Ram, similar to the one that was seen leaving the crime scene. His much younger live-in girlfriend, 18-year-old Colleen Larson, eventually confessed to committing the shooting at Tim's urging. She admitted her guilt in court and was sentenced to 16.5 years in prison, which she'll be required to serve at least 2/3 of behind bars. Larson is slated to be released in 2034 at the age of 36, which will give her enough time to make something of her life, but ensures that she'll spend her young adulthood locked away. Amaker was found guilty of attempted murder and received an 18-year prison sentence. He was neither apologetic nor remorseful at his sentencing, and continued to maintain his innocence, causing the judge to question whether he's grown to believe his own lies. He's scheduled to be released in 2034 at the age of 53. 2. Irina Malinovskaya. Just days before Christmas in 2004 in Wilmington, Delaware, Irina Zlotnikov was found brutally bludgeoned to death in her boyfriend, Robert Bondare's apartment. She had been kicked, stomped, and beaten with a hammer. Robert suggested to police that his recent ex-girlfriend, Irina Malinovskaya, could be responsible. He said that he had told Malinovskaya to stop contacting him, but that she failed to respect his wishes and had even shown up at his law school a few months earlier. Malinovskaya was a student at the University of Pennsylvania's prestigious Wharton School of Finance. She and Robert had dated in 2003, but went their separate ways later that year when Robert moved to Delaware for law school. The two maintained occasional contact and continued to casually see one another for a while, even while dating other people, before Robert decided he wanted to fully move on with his life. Prosecutors charged Malinovskaya with murder and accused her of killing Zlotnikov in a jealous rage. Court proceedings ended in a mistrial not once, not twice, but 3 times, as each trial was met by a hopelessly deadlocked jury. In June 2008, nearly 4 years after Zlotnikov's murder, Malinovskaya pleaded no contest to a reduced manslaughter charge. She served 5 years in an American prison and was promptly deported to Russia upon her release. A 5-year prison sentence on its own isn't enough to ruin someone's life, but it put Malinovskaya's life plans on hold, including finishing college, and if she had any plans to pursue a future in the United States, they ended with her conviction, which deemed her ineligible for future visas. And to throw those opportunities away over an obsession with a man is a tragic story from any angle. Malinovskaya has reportedly lived a very secluded existence since her release from prison, and it's unclear what she's up to today. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Caede Tadesse. An unspeakable tragedy struck Harvard University in 1995 when a 20-year-old pre-med student from Ethiopia stabbed her Vietnamese roommate 45 times. A guest who stayed overnight at the woman's dorm room awoke to see Caede Tadesse plunging a hunting knife into Trang Ho. The visitor tried to intervene, but was also stabbed. By the time help arrived, Trang had succumbed to her injuries, and Tadesse was also dead. While many questioned whether Harvard needed to provide better mental health care, others scoured for clues that would offer some insight into why Tadesse took such extreme measures. A look into Tadesse's activities leading up to the murder revealed that she felt isolated and her mental health was deteriorating. She feared her grades were not high enough to get her into a good medical school and had trouble making friends. At one point, she sent a letter to a stranger begging for friendship and wrote in her diary about how lonely she felt. Tadesse's peers would later tell a New Yorker journalist that the young woman lacked the westernized savvy that other foreign female students seemed to have. And it wasn't for a lack of trying. Tadesse kept meticulous notes and even made audio tapes to try coaching herself into having better social skills. But it apparently just didn't work. Tadesse finally thought she had found someone she could be close with when she met Trang Ho. Her final breaking point came when Trang decided not to room with her the following year, despite Tadesse's begging and pleading for her to reconsider. Both women had a lot of talent and skill to offer the world. After all, Harvard doesn't accept just anybody. Sadly, that was all taken away due to a young woman's trouble, which would have most likely proven to be temporary. 8. Zoom call tragedy. Back in August 2021, a 21-year-old mother from Florida was shot to death by her 2-year-old son. The child found the gun in their home and proceeded to play with it. Shemaya Lynn was on a Zoom call with some coworkers when, out of nowhere, shots were fired. According to prosecutors, the boy apparently discovered the weapon inside his Paw Patrol backpack on the floor of his parents' bedroom. It wasn't secured properly, and the safety also wasn't on, allowing the little boy to wreak havoc with what he probably assumed was just a realistic toy. Shemaya was shot in the head, and she unfortunately didn't survive her injuries. Colleagues on the Zoom call with the woman immediately dialed 911 after the accident, as they literally just watched her get killed in front of them. Shemaya's partner and the father of her son, 22-year-old Viandre Avery, wasn't home at the time of the incident. But he got to the residence shortly after everything happened and also called the authorities to report the grim scene he found. He told the dispatcher, "There's blood everywhere," after explaining that he'd just gotten home. Even though police believed Avery wasn't present when the shooting occurred, he was consequently charged with failure to securely store a firearm as well as manslaughter. He was arrested and is currently being held without bond at the Seminole County Jail. Unfortunately, no trial date has been set, so Avery has yet to be sentenced for his involvement in the crime. As tragic as this case is, it could have been avoided with proper handling and storing of the weapon. 7. Shots fired. In late 2022, a man from Shaftesbury, Vermont was charged with reckless endangerment after firing his gun inside his residence and endangering the lives of 3 victims. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but 31-year-old Gerardo Zelaya Granados acted in blatant disregard for the safety of the people around him. According to reports from the Vermont State Police Department, he shot his firearm into the ground and air inside his home, while others, including a young child, were there to witness his behavior in disbelief. Authorities responded to the scene after receiving multiple reports of a weapons offense. Deputies, troopers, officers from the Bennington Police Department, and state game wardens all tried to locate Gerardo at his home. For hours, law enforcement held the perimeter of the property and cleared the scene in order to avoid an escalated situation. Finally, at about 6:30 p.m. on November 26, 2022, they made contact with Gerardo. The man was immediately placed under arrest, and thankfully he didn't fight back or cause another scene. Afterward, Gerardo was transported to the town's local barracks to be processed. He was issued his conditions of release and was held at the Marble Valley Correctional Center on a $200 bail. At his arraignment on charges of 3 counts of reckless endangerment and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, more information was revealed about the situation and why everything happened. Based on a court affidavit, the police were dispatched to Gerardo's home after learning that 2 people were attempting to hide in a neighbor's garage. They claimed to have been threatened. Apparently, those same individuals visited Gerardo's home from New York to purchase a PlayStation 5 console through Facebook Marketplace. Shortly after their arrival, Gerardo became agitated and started shooting rounds from his .30-30 rifle and handgun. A third person involved in the matter was later found by police. The affidavit also says that the 3 individuals gave fake names to the authorities and were trying to sell marijuana to the suspect as well. So it's unclear if the story about the PlayStation is real or not. Regardless, if convicted on all counts, Gerardo could face up to 8 years in prison. 6. Hostage situation. In April 2016, 2 suspects were arrested in Newington, Connecticut, after taking a hostage during an armed robbery at a 7-Eleven. The situation went down at around 2 a.m. at the convenience store located on Willard Avenue, and it ended 1 hour later. Police explained to Fox 61 that when they got to the scene, they saw 2 armed men and the store's clerk inside. Officers said they noticed the clerk was bleeding from his head and was being held at gunpoint by the suspects. Investigators determined that the worker had sustained injuries after being hit by the criminal's shotgun. There was apparently a customer inside the building too, but they only received minor injuries. After getting a handle on the situation, Connecticut State Police assisted Newington officers in forming a perimeter. A short standoff between law enforcement and the robbers ensued, but in the end, the suspects left the convenience store holding a white towel and turned themselves in. The criminals were identified as 18-year-old Guillermo Casada and 21-year-old Albert Gonzalez. They were charged with reckless endangerment, criminal use of a firearm, conspiracy to commit robbery, and more. Unfortunately, even though this case happened back in 2016, it's not entirely clear what the end result was. 5. Worst bus driver ever. Most parents think their children are perfectly safe on a school bus. But in Franklin County, Alabama, this belief was shattered in late 2022 when a bus driver was caught driving erratically while transporting 40 kids. Sheriff Shannon Oliver reported that deputies received a concerning call about a school bus early in the morning on September 16th. Before authorities arrived to handle the situation, a concerned motorist apparently pulled in front of the bus to force the driver to stop. That same individual then boarded the vehicle, assuming that the driver was experiencing some type of medical emergency. But instead, they discovered something far worse. The driver was identified as 58-year-old Rhonda Barksdale. She was given a field sobriety test when authorities got there, but she failed and was immediately arrested. Thankfully, none of the children on the bus were hurt. The woman's blood was tested in order to determine the amount of alcohol in her system, as well as any other substances she may have ingested before jumping behind the wheel. And a month later, the test results showed that she had ethanol, amphetamine, clonazepam, and zolpidem in her bloodstream when the incident occurred. Clonazepam is a sedative that's commonly used to treat seizures, anxiety, and panic disorders. Zolpidem is also a sedative that helps treat insomnia, and according to drugfree.org, an individual can feel tired after taking the medication, especially if they're a woman. It's suggested by the drug manufacturer to wait 4 hours before doing anything that may require them to stay alert, like driving a school bus full of innocent children. To make matters worse, Rhonda also had an alcohol level of 0.09, which is well over the legal limit for bus drivers in Franklin County. 10 days after Rhonda was arrested, the school superintendent sent a notice to the county's Board of Education suggesting that the irresponsible driver be fired. And on that very same day, Rhonda was officially terminated. She was also handed 40 counts of reckless endangerment, 1 count for every child on the bus, as well as charges of driving under the influence. She pleaded not guilty on September 21st, and she's requested her case go to trial, and so the situation is ongoing. 4. Attempted hit and run. In July 2021, a man from Burley, Idaho, was arrested for trying to run over a little boy in his pickup truck after getting into an argument with some kids at a skate park. The Cassia County Sheriff's Office booked 26-year-old Michael Anthony Guizar into jail after the incident. He was handed charges of felony injury to a child, assault with intent to commit murder, reckless driving, and aggravated assault. Local station KTVB interviewed 11-year-old Nathaniel Wallace, and he explained that he'd accidentally run into another kid while riding his bike with a friend. The group of children and Wallace's friend swore at each other before a grown man came up to them. That same man, believed to be Guizar, chased Wallace and his pal to the opposite end of the skate park before getting into his vehicle and driving toward them. Surveillance video from the skate park showed Guizar's pickup swerving off the road towards Wallace's direction, driving over grass and even sidewalk. Wallace can be seen jumping from his bike to avoid getting struck by the truck, and he runs away seconds before it crushes the bicycle beneath its wheels. If Wallace hadn't fled, Guizar could have severely injured or even killed him. And so, Wallace and his friend ran to a nearby house to ask for help, where occupants reported the crime to the police. The public helped authorities identify Guizar as they were tasked with tracking down the driver. Luckily, neither of the young boys were injured during the incident, but they're likely to have long-lasting trauma. A year later, in August 2022, a Cassia County judge sentenced Guizar to serve 12 years in state prison, with 3 years fixed for his aggravated assault charge. He was given an additional 180 days in jail for his misdemeanor count of reckless driving too. Guizar was also issued an undisclosed amount of fees and court costs for both criminal counts. 3. Teacher fires gun in school. In early 2018, a teacher from Georgia was arrested after firing a shot from his handgun out of his classroom's window. Nobody was wounded in the incident at Dalton High School except for a female student who hurt her ankle while running through the hallway. Many students were terrified after hearing the gunshot, causing a panic. The shooting took place around 85 miles, 137 kilometers north of Atlanta, and it heightened the already tense discussion regarding whether or not guns should be allowed inside school buildings, in the wake of Parkland, Florida mass shooting, which happened only 2 weeks earlier. According to police spokesman Bruce Frazier, the school's 53-year-old social studies teacher, Randall Davidson, refused to let students come into his classroom during his planning period. Some kids complained about this, so the principal tried to unlock the teacher's door with a key, prompting Davidson to fire his handgun. Immediately afterward, Dalton High School went into lockdown, and the police came to evacuate the area surrounding the classroom Davidson had barricaded himself inside. It took about 45 minutes to convince the teacher to surrender, but he was finally placed in police custody without further incident. Frazier told CNN that there wasn't any evidence that Davidson wanted to harm anybody, but he'd still illegally shot a firearm inside a classroom. The teacher was given charges of carrying a weapon on school grounds, disrupting a public school, aggravated assault, possession of a gun during commission of a crime, and reckless conduct. During his trial, Davidson explained to the jury that he'd been seriously contemplating ending his life on the day of the incident, and that the school's resource officer was able to talk him out of that decision. He expressed remorse for his actions and apologized in court for them. But in the end, he was sentenced to 2 years behind bars and was given 8 years on probation as part of his plea deal. It's unlikely he'll ever step foot in a classroom again, too. 2. That's not a bear. In late 2022, a hunter from Vermont accidentally shot and injured another hunter that he thought was a bear. The 35-year-old victim was hit in the abdomen by a single bullet as he was walking through some private wooded property in Huntington. According to the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department, a third hunter called 911 to report the incident. The injured victim was taken to the University of Vermont Medical Center to get treated. Luckily, he survived and was reported to be in stable condition. Neither of the men have been identified by authorities, but the 25-year-old hunter who fired the shot is facing charges of negligent use of a gun, reckless endangerment, and felony aggravated assault. Officials reported that nobody involved in the situation was wearing blaze orange, the bright color that most hunters wear to avoid situations like these. In a statement, Game Warden Detective Sergeant Robert Currier said that these accidents are highly preventable. He explained that this case highlights the importance of accurately identifying your target before firing. Currier also said that the Vermont Warden Service encourages the public, especially hunters, to wear blaze orange during hunting season. this case is fairly recent, so the 25-year-old hunter responsible for the accidental shooting hasn't been sentenced yet. 1. Accidental paralysis. A police officer from Maryland was sentenced to serve over a year in jail for his actions in 2019 that left a man paralyzed from the neck down. During a routine traffic stop for expired tags, DeMonte Ward Blake complied with commands, but he verbally berated officers. Brian Strong then decided to arrest DeMonte for disorderly conduct, and he was accused of slamming him into the concrete. This ultimately resulted in the suspect's paralysis. But Officer Strong's defense attorney argued that during a struggle with DeMonte, the two of them fell and the injury wasn't intentional. Malcolm Ruff, the attorney representing DeMonte's family, told the judge that before the run-in with Officer Strong, his client was a gregarious 24-year-old, but the accident caused him agonizing pain. DeMonte passed away a year after the incident from an unrelated shooting, and his family sought justice for the officer they felt played a role in his death. In the end, Strong was found guilty of 3 misdemeanors: misconduct in office, reckless endangerment, and second-degree assault. Judge Danica Cotton sentenced him to 20 years behind bars, with all but 1 year suspended. Thanks for watching. If you had a choice between living paycheck to paycheck for the next 15 years and then hitting a multi-million-dollar windfall that will support you for the rest of your life, or enjoying a comfortable but average guaranteed salary for the rest of your life starting today, which would you choose and why? Let us know in the comments below. And remember to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.